Follower of One, and this is the show. We don't have a name for it yet, but we're still thinking about it. You're welcome to share your ideas and thoughts. Our goal is to help believers integrate their faith in their work full time. This is our live stream that we do each week, and today my guest is Kris Castro from Shift. Kris, would you tell everyone hi?
Hey everybody, nice to see all of you. Good to be with you. It's going to be
Yeah.
fun.
Speaking of seeing you, if you're catching this, please say hi in the comments and let us communicate with you. We're going to ask some questions today. We're going to propose some ideas. Our topic that we want to talk about is adventures in following Jesus at work or wherever Jesus takes us, including our work. And so, Kris, thanks for joining us.
Yes, it's going to be a really great conversation. As always, adventures
So,
with Jesus can't help but be fun.
that's right. If you get a moment, join us by entering a comment. If you also, as you listen to this live stream today, like us on Facebook. If you're watching on Facebook, we're also on YouTube. You can catch us on the Follower of One YouTube channel and subscribe. Um, Today, we want to talk a little bit about this idea of the adventures following Jesus. And Kris is on here because she has this story and a book. Tell us a little bit about the book, Kris, that you've written.
Well, the book was birthed from the adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we did a podcast several months back and I talked a little bit about it. So, in a nutshell, one day I was running out of money, like happens to every entrepreneur. Like you just get through these dry seasons. And I looked up at the sky and I was like, Lord, if I can't pay rent, I might as well live in my car. And I put my checkbook down and walked away. And then about a week later, I was with some friends who also are very connected to Jesus. And I was sharing what I said, and they were all laughing because we all get to that place. And out of my mouth, without any prompting, came this utterance. This has never happened to me before. And I suddenly said, and I can get in my car and travel the country and be Jesus's light and feet. And I inhaled sharply and I said, what was that? And everybody around me is laughing and they're like, you should go. And I'm like, that's crazy. And I really was like, that's just crazy. And I dropped it. But the Holy Spirit would not let it go. And through a series of no, God, you're crazy, please show me confirmations, the Lord made it very clear that this actually was a real invitation
Yeah.
and that I had a choice, but it was an invitation to step
Yeah.
out in faith and to go. But he wouldn't tell me where. He just said,
Yeah.
go. It was a literal Abraham adventure. And I ended up, without my knowledge until I was into the adventure, it ended up being a 12,000-mile 3-month adventure across the United States with divine appointments, divine miraculous things happen, a miraculous provision. It
Yeah.
was an adventure with Jesus. And I came home a radically different woman because of the faith that I had developed that was deeper than faith I had had previously on that journey.
Yeah. Very cool. And the title of the book is,
Crazy might be a blessing in disguise.
yeah. And I feel kind of bad because we were talking right up to this, but I didn't get my copy of it handy. If you have a copy handy, show it to someone. Otherwise, I'll find mine here in a minute. But
I'd have to get up and go get it, so don't worry about it.
but a very, very cool story. Very interesting how God called you through this process. What I wanted to talk about a little bit today are some of the adventures that we see. What are some adventures that you have experienced in the workplace or in the marketplace? of adventures of things that God does on a little less kind of radical basis. I don't want to call it radical necessarily, but 3 months and 12,000 miles is a lot. But what are some of the adventures that you've seen, or and I'll talk about a few too. I'm curious if any of our listeners have ever interacted with God at work in such a way to where you knew it was Him and that He was calling you in an adventure. He was asking you to get outside of your job description. What are some of the adventures that you've experienced, Kris, along those lines?
Oh, there have been so many, but before I actually answer that question, let
Yeah.
me frame it a second. So, up until that adventure, the Lord had been training me without my knowledge. The Lord had been training me to hear His voice and to follow that prompting, to
Hmm.
trust that it was Him. And it started off simple, like go tell that person I love them,
Yeah.
or that person in the grocery store that walks by, you know, ask them if they need prayer. It was simple stuff that wasn't high risk, that gave me the ability to test if it was him. And a lot of neat things happened. And so by the time I got to that, yep, that's the book. So by the time I got to that crazy adventure, I had been practicing enough to be able to leave on that adventure.
Yeah.
And when I came back, I had gotten so used to the promptings that it became second nature. And so I'd encourage everybody that God doesn't stop speaking. You just haven't started listening, is my, and that was me. I mean, he's been speaking to me my whole life, and I thought I understood what he was saying.
Yeah.
But now it's like all the time. And I don't mean audibly, I mean those spiritual leadings where you feel something or you sense
Hmm.
something. And so now to answer your question, during the day, I'm a solopreneur, you know, I work from home, so I don't have a lot of people I interact with, but I do have a lot of people I interact with via email, via these kinds of things. And sometimes it's just the Lord lays somebody on my heart. And so I'll reach out via email and I'll say, hey, you know, I was thinking about you today. How are things going? You know, just checking in, praying for you. And I'll get an email back with what's going on in their life. And sometimes I can respond back with a phone call or an email to encourage and help them out. And so I get to be his light and feet all the
Hmm.
time.
Yeah.
But one of the most recent adventures is a financial adventure. And so I found out recently that a friend of mine needed some money. And I generally, because the Lord has been training me to live on Him, I generally run with a very bare bank account. And every day it's like, all right, God, I guess you're paying the bills today. You know, so I'm just used to God showing up. But this particular time I had a buffer of money, and which is odd. And when she said she needed $200, I said, well, let me pray about it. I can give you something. And I went out for a walk, and later that day, I really felt like the Lord said, give her the $200. Like, be generous. And I was like, oh, okay, sure. Like, no problem. So
Hmm.
I gave her the money and blessed her and whatever. And I was like, okay, like, God, you'll figure out how to pay the bills, because I just gave the money I had for bills to her. And no lie, a couple of days later, another friend of mine reached out and said, hey, the Lord told me to give you some cash. And I'm like, okay. She gave me $300. Like,
Yeah.
I gave two, she gave three, sewing and reaping.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of adventure that we get to live on when we really do believe who Jesus is, the great provider, the Prince of Peace, the, you
Exactly.
know, the comforter. I mean, all of those things he really is. And if you believe it, you get to have these amazing adventures with Jesus all the time, because your security is in him, not
Yeah.
in your stuff, not in your career, not in your family. It's in him.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great example. A lot of people, though, also jump to this other extreme where they start trying to do things to get God to behave in a particular way. And those types of things, they don't work very often. Is that your experience as well?
No, God is not a what's the word? He's not like a big brother that you have to persuade anything.
Yeah.
He's your loving father and provider who loves you. And he'll withhold if you need to learn something, but he'll also generously provide and give. Like he's just a good daddy and he's got perfect eyesight, perfect timing. And even when I don't like it, I have to believe it.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's interesting. We find most of what we experience through the interactions that I have with friends and most of what I've experienced in the workplace is I'll be praying about a particular thing. And then shortly thereafter, I'll get an idea. And that idea relates to what I was praying about. And I have to believe that if that idea lines up with scripture, that was God telling me to do something. He might be telling me to buy someone a lunch or to pay for the person behind me in the line at a fast food place or any number of things. I think God calls us to those by giving us these ideas, and we talk ourselves out of them. We had a story from a mission trip here just recently where we were talking about just sending text messages to friends. And so Greg, who was on the call, you remember because I think you were on these calls, but Greg sent a bunch of text messages out to friends between the two evening calls that we have at night and got a response back. And it turned out that one of his text messages was very timely and made a big difference in the life of a friend because he just listened to God and did what God was prompting him to do. I think it's exciting when we trust God with the ideas that He gives us. Almost always they look like service, and they're a little inconvenient, or they may be big time inconvenient, but they call us out of what we're comfortable with and challenge us to do something to be a blessing to someone else. Right?
Absolutely. And sometimes I find that it's not even about the other person, it's about me. Like, am I willing to risk having that conversation with somebody? Am I willing to believe? Am I willing to go left instead of right, even though it makes no sense? And
Yes.
there might be nothing over there, but God just wanted to see, are you willing to listen?
Yes. No, and that's another great reason, right? I think he challenges us in this regard because are we willing to listen? Are we willing to go? Um, I need to look up the verse, right? But he tries us in a little thing to see if we'll be faithful in bigger things, and so he puts these different opportunities to us so that we will see him for bigger things. He
Yep.
gives us he For many of us, if he gave us a really wild idea right now, we would blow that off. But if we've been listening to him like you were talking about, where we've been trying the little things that lead up to that, then we are possible to experience some new revelation from him for us because we did what he challenged us to do, even though it was extreme in some
And
regard.
it's like the parable of the talents. The first guy hid it because he didn't want
Mhm.
to make his master angry. The second guy invested it and got back what he invested, and the third guy invested the it again, but it was a bigger amount, and he got back. And that lesson is that for me, the lesson is if God is asking you to invest yourself in something, when you invest, you get back a bigger blessing and
Yeah.
or an equatable blessing. But your blessing is always on the other side of the risk. And if you never take the risk, you never get the blessing. And they become stepstones. Every blessing leads to another blessing, another blessing. If you skip the blessing, you're going to skip the step.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? Or you skip the blessing, you skip one of these, and you don't get to go to the next one. You might get another opportunity at this level again days or weeks, but you don't get the bigger opportunities until you've begun with the little things.
Hmm.
Um, have you ever been challenged? I want to make a little bit of a shift here. Have you ever been challenged in a work environment to have to do something unpleasant that you feel like God wanted you to do? Like resist the temptation to stretch the truth and give someone some really bad news, or to go out of the way to have to do something to clean up a mess, right? Which you could act like it didn't happen and probably get away with it, but you didn't act like it didn't happen and you had to stick around and clean it up. Have you had any experiences like that? I know I'm not being terribly precise, but I couldn't come up with a good way to phrase this.
Well, it's a little different. I think because of the work that I do a lot of one-on-one work and a lot of group on one work.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you have to have hard conversations. Um, and I mean, people pay me to help them grow and to help them achieve things. And I would not be serving with them if I didn't hold up a mirror and say, hey, you wanted this, but you're
Yes.
doing that, or whatever. So there have been situations where clearly they weren't aligning with what they said. And I've had to call them out in a, in a nice way. Um, and have that conversation with them. And those have been interesting. Most of the time they go well because the Lord has trained me how to communicate truth. I used to be overly blunt. Now I'm
Mm-hmm.
mature and wiser. That happens with age and business learning.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it's been those situations, and some of the other things that it's been is somebody will say something, and you can just tell they're saying it from a place of uh, either poor beliefs or pain or woundedness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my job to be able to go, okay, I know that's what you believe or feel, but let's look at this, and to suggest or help them see, is there another perspective to prompt a breakthrough? And
Yeah.
so things like that happen. But I always say that regardless of whether or not I'm working with a believer or somebody who doesn't believe in Jesus, that the Holy Spirit is always at my side. And because I very much, everything that I do is filtered through that lens, that I get the coolest insights. And I mean, it's like it
Mm-hmm.
can't be from me. I never would have thought to ask that,
Yeah.
or I would have never said that. But it's like this stuff because the Holy Spirit knows this person. I don't, or sometimes I
Yeah.
do, but I don't know them as well as Jesus does.
Yeah.
So it's that.
No, I was actually thinking about a time in my past. I understand what you're talking about. I worked in a number of different environments. I had a lot of jobs, which I've talked about before on the podcast. I had a pretty checkered career, did a lot of different things, and made a lot of mistakes. And I felt like sometimes what God was doing was calling me out, making me to correct my own mistakes, that I would stumble into a situation, behave badly, say something sharp or do something wrong, and then have to go back and apologize or have to go back and make things right. I, I made a lot of mistakes along those lines in my career. I remember one time messing something up by just taking I let it be known that I felt like I got the credit for something that really involved a lot of people, and was called down on that, and then also went back to some of those a lot of people and went to apologize to them. The second piece of that wasn't really demanded of me, but I felt like it was necessary, um, just because I've kind of broken relationships, and some of my stupid mistakes were made even before I trusted Christ in the workplace, and I couldn't go back and fix those. But there were other times when I was called to go back and fix them, and I just think it's sometimes we want to bypass those things. sometimes the adventures aren't so fun.
Yeah. And as you were talking, I was reminded of something there early in my career. I was a like an account executive slash administrative assistant. I was
Uh-huh.
a whole bunch of things at an ad agency, and I was tasked with setting up these mailing labels. And I had gone through, and there were like, gosh, 600 or 700 names. And I put it all in the spreadsheet and I got it all set and I printed everything and we mailed everything out. And in about a week and a half, we started getting all of these returns.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, what the heck? And I went and looked, and by accident, when I had sorted it, one of the columns had gotten out of place.
Oh.
And so it was like every single one of those labels was wrong. And I
Oh wow.
remember like being scared, like, oh my, like all of this postage money, the time money, the mark. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a very expensive mistake. And I literally had that moment, like, I don't know how to handle this. And my integrity
Yeah.
came out, and I'm like, I guess I need to go tell my boss. And so I did, and I admitted the mistake. And he was so gracious, angry, but gracious. He didn't fire me, and we redid the whole thing again. But
Yeah.
it was one of those moments where I knew this was defining for me. Like, I could do the right thing and just be called out on the carpet, or I could do the wrong thing, and I would always know that I lied.
Yeah. Exactly. And for those of you who are listening to this, if you're listening to it live, please leave a comment and let us know you're there. I'm not seeing comments. I got to believe that no one's probably listening to us. This is still a very new, very early show that doesn't have a name. So, but if you're there and you're listening, leave us a comment and hopefully I will see it. I'm still stumbling through and learning this technology. What kinds of adventures have you been called to in the workplace? Uh, Managing people and how to deal with difficulties and challenges. That's another adventure that we often go through, right? Where we have to either be the boss in that situation where someone made a big mistake, or another one of the opportunities that I've come across that was a real adventure was it was common at one of the companies that I worked at. Um, Back in the day, there were rules about how you reported the use of a company car. There still are, I'm sure, rules. I haven't had a company car in light years now, but um, there were rules about how you reported the use of a company car. And I felt like that I was being called to report mine more accurately, which ended up costing my family money. We had to adjust our taxes because I felt like I hadn't reported that properly. But I was also afraid that I might expose other people in the company who had been doing it the other way. And so I went to them to let them know what was going on, just in case it created difficulty for them. Um, those kinds of difficult challenges where doing what's right could compromise something for another coworker, and I felt like I needed to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
It's just interesting how the different challenges confront situations.
Yep.
And
And I just thought of another one.
sure.
So in my world, I contract with people,
Hmm.
and there's a, another guy that I've been doing work for years and years and years, and he went through a season because of COVID where things were just financially horrible for him,
Hmm.
and it turned out that he was struggling to make to pay all his contractors, and he asked all of us if we would be willing to continue working and not get paid until he could turn things around. And I knew in my heart, because I've been walking with this guy for a long time as a contractor, that I could make the decision to walk away and he would understand. Or I could make the decision not to and still support and serve him and his clients and trust that the Lord would bring the money when he bring the money. And I chose to stay. And it's been this really neat way of honoring and supporting him
Yeah.
and trusting God. And I would not have been able to do that if I didn't have my security in God. And it's been a blessing to him because I help where he needs me to, and I don't have to worry about the finances. I know he's
Hmm.
going to get it to me when he get it to me. But that's been neat too, to be able to serve and support someone by choice instead of begrudgingly.
Yes. No, I think that's the key word, right? When we choose, then we create this situation. The choice was because we trust our relationship with God, we trust in Him. We're making a choice based on our understanding of Him. So that's a faith based thing. And God responds when we do it transactionally because we expect a particular result, or when we do it out of guilt or shame or anything like that. It's a different model. But I
It
believe when we
is.
can do it and do it openly and by choice, then God intervenes. He comes back to kind of reinforce this faith in the first place. I actually thought of another story I wanted to share too. We do this thing called a marketplace mission trip, and if you haven't heard about that, you can go to our website, which is www.followerofone.org, and check out the marketplace mission trip. It's a 2 week exercise where we are intentional about integrating our faith and work. And during those exercises, which one of them is going on right now as we record this, we challenge people through that to pray for their coworkers, to appreciate people, to serve others, to know what they believe, to practice being able to talk about their faith. And then if they get an opportunity to interact with a coworker on the topic of faith, they can speak for themselves. They can use I and me statements. During this trip one time, one couple decided that they were going to buy a video game for a friend. They just felt like this, they wanted to bless this friend. And so they started searching for this video game, it's not sold new anymore. It was a used game, but they wanted a particular version, and they actually found it online at a local store here in stock. And so they went over to that store to buy it. But when they got to the store people couldn't find it anywhere. And they found out through searching and several other things that what had happened is that 2 years earlier, someone had put that game on reserve and never bought it. And so they were kind of struck by how here in this gift they were giving away, they got a vision into how God works because God had managed to find them a version of this game that had been reserved 2 years earlier. God had challenged someone else to reserve this game for them. So their friend didn't get a used version. Their friend got a brand new version of the game. And it just happened on this fluke that was 2 years in the making. And so those kinds of adventures, they would have never thought of that had they not been asking God, hey, what can we do? And then they chase down the idea of, wouldn't it be great to give this game to this friend? Seems like a really strange kind of idea to somebody from the boomer generation, but I can understand because God's moving and He's making a difference in people's lives.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting to me too, because sometimes we don't think of them as adventures. Those negative experiences, right? The difficult ones and the challenging ones. It's only after we're through them that we think of them as adventures. But my goal is to help all of us see the adventure of walking with Jesus at work. So I have another question for you. What could we? What's a challenge that we could make to ourselves to help us um, step more into this relationship with Jesus at work and look for those adventures?
Well, I think the first thing is back to your point about the difficult stuff is to recognize that all growth requires discomfort. Otherwise, you're not going to grow. And it is an adventure. My favorite image that comes to mind is the Lord of the Rings. Like there are so many moments in that movie where the good guys are going through these just downright difficult situations, and you know the story, so you know how it all works out. But in the moment, if you were to place yourself in that character, they had no idea if they were going to live or die. They had no idea if they were going to make it. You know,
Yeah.
they had no idea about anything. They're just struggling.
Yeah.
And they grew and became these incredible individuals at the end of the movie because of every hardship they endured. So it was an adventure. It just wasn't exactly enjoyable. And that's the thing, is you absolutely have to shift your mindset. You have to get up every day and say, Jesus, I'm yours. If it hurts, I'm still yours. If it's wonderful, I'm still yours. And Jesus, can I serve you today?
Yeah.
And just to get up and have that attitude. And then at that point, it's learning to hear his voice and just do what he says. And that's, I don't know if you know this, but the in the Jewish world, the Shema is a prayer that's said all the time. Well, Shema just doesn't mean hear, O Israel. It has this connotation of hear and obey.
Yeah.
And so I've gotten to a place as to where I Shema. I mean, yes, Lord. Like, I don't always want to. And yes, sometimes I do argue with God, but I Shema. Like, it's my lifestyle. I'm moving into a Shema lifestyle. Hear,
Yeah.
obey, hear, obey. And it doesn't always work, and I'm not perfect, and I screw it up, but it's an amazing adventure lifestyle to
Yeah.
Shema.
No, I think that's a great point, right? If in our 21st century world, we can separate hearing from acting as if what we heard is true. But in the Hebrew world, uh, you didn't hear unless you changed your behavior accordingly. And I think that's a great point. If we, and that may be part of the challenge, that's part of the challenge that I was thinking about. I want to challenge myself and anyone listening to this podcast or recording or watching the live stream or watching the video replay. If you hear God, if God gives you an idea while you're praying, start trying to figure out how you can do it. Instead of asking God, is this what you want me to do? Start trying to do what it was you heard. What the idea that you got, how can I make that happen? Start changing your prayer to that. How can I make this happen? Can I make a payment? Can I do something? Someone, you see someone who's asking for a handout, and like me, I didn't have any cash, and so, but I found out a way to do that. I try and keep some Subway gift cards in my glove box, things like that. What can we do to make ourselves be in a position to where we can listen to Him? And so start asking, your prayer changes a little bit at that moment. Okay, I heard this. If this is you, show me how to do it. I think that's the challenge that I was thinking of for people. Any other challenges that you can think of?
Well, I would even take that
Here in
one
the
step further
uh-huh.
to to say that sometimes on purpose the Lord won't give you more than the first step, because he wants you to obediently step into the first step before he'll give you the
Mm-hmm.
second clue. It's like a mystery, you have to read the whole novel to get everything that's going on, so
Yeah.
God will go, hey, here's the first step
Yeah.
here, then you'll see what to do next. And I've had several experiences with that where I didn't know how it was all going to work out. I just did the
Yeah.
first thing that came to mind. And when I did that, the second thing came to mind.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point, right? The answer to how may not be the end result, right? It may be the first step. And so, in every one of these cases, when we ask God a question, if He gives us an answer, we have to act on it
Mm-hmm.
because it may be incremental. Do you trust me? Will you step along this line? Doing the next thing is often the right thing to do, right? What's the next thing? Well, I can do this. I
Mm-hmm.
can't do everything today, but if I can do this, then I did my next thing.
Absolutely.
I think that's a great idea as well. So, I was, in a way, I was kind of half hoping that we would get a little more visitors to join us and that we would get some feedback. One of the questions that we're trying to discover, so as you listen to this, even if you listen to this after the fact, let us know a time every week that would be good for you. We want to do this at the time and along the topics that are helpful to workplace believers. This topic about adventures following Jesus, part of it came out of a conversation that Kris and I were having, and me just trying to think of how to do this live stream in a way that would be beneficial to believers in the workplace. So we would love for you to suggest additional topics. We would love for you to suggest additional ideas. In the show notes, I'll have connections, how you can connect to Kris, find out more about her book and her website, connect with her on LinkedIn. You know how to find us. It's at followerofone.org. Her story is online and things like that. And Kris, I don't want to keep people longer than we have to. Anything else that you want to share about helping people with their adventures following Jesus?
I think I would close out by saying today or tomorrow, carve out 15 minutes with a pen and a paper
Yeah.
and just sit in a quiet place. Maybe if you have to put some music on to drown out the outside or whatever, but just sit in a quiet place and just ask the Lord, Lord, what is my next growth adventure? And just be silent. And even if it sounds crazy, write down what he said. And then if you sense some truth in it, or if you're afraid that there's some truth in it, just pray through it and meditate on what it says and ask him to confirm and clarify. And when you're sure, even if you don't like it,
Yeah.
when you're sure that's what he said, then ask the people you trust the most, who love and support you, to walk with you through that growth adventure. And just take the first step, and God's going to honor you in that.
Oh, I think that's great advice. Let's ask God, take some time, ask God what he wants us to do, sit and listen. I think that's great advice, Kris. That's another thing I don't do very often, right? I don't just listen. So I need to commit that 15 minutes. I will make some time to do that in the next day. Take the 15 minutes to sit and listen. And I would encourage you to, just as you're praying, any idea that pops into your head could be God. So you want to take some notes, like she said, have a pencil or a pen, write it down, and then, you know, what can I do? What can I do about this idea? Yes, sir. What can I do? I think that's a great idea. I want to let people go today, but I'm having a blast talking with you, Kris. I'm excited about what God's doing through Follower of One. I'm excited for this friendship that we have and how He's moving in our lives. Remind people again how they can contact you or connect with you.
My website is begin to, that's a T-O, shift.com. You can find me all over Facebook and LinkedIn. I've got lots of great blogs that you can check out, both video, mostly videos recently. So
Yeah.
yeah, and if you have any questions, private message me or send me an email. I'm happy to chat with you.
Yeah. Stay tuned as well. Next week at this time, we're still going to be at this time for a few more weeks, but we're open to moving this live stream to where it's most beneficial to people. So leave us a comment even after this recording is over, and we'll see it. Or you can shoot a note to info@followerofone.org and let us know what you think about the live stream, what you think about this whole topic of how we can help believers integrate their faith into their work. We want to be more intentional about living our faith every day. You can learn more about our organization and let us know what you think at followerofone.org. Thanks everyone for being a part of this. And, Kris, thank you for being a part of this as well. I'm excited to see what God does with us through all this.
Absolutely. It's going to be great. So have adventures with Jesus every day.
Yep. See you, everyone.